Good afternoon and welcome to Talkback Thursday, presented by the Jane Susie Gouge Performing Arts Center at Auburn University. I'm Amy Miller, Director of Programming and Education here at the Gouge Center, and I'm beyond thrilled to be joined by Branford Marsalis today. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, Amy.
Our guest, Branford, is without question one of the greatest jazz legends of our time. So we're honored to have you on our season, a coming up performance at the Gouge Center on Sunday, February 20th here. And we'll just get right into the conversation. We're thrilled that you took the time to join us today. Yeah. So we're back to touring. I know you've been touring. You had a European tour, Branford, last summer, I believe it was. And after our hiatus, which felt like it lasted so long through 2020, you're back on the road. Have you been touring quite a bit in the last year?
No, it's all fits and starts. We went from 100 to 0 on March 7th of 2020. And then we didn't work again until July 2021.
Okay.
And we did 2 weeks in July, and then there was nothing until November. Then there was 2 weeks in November, then there was nothing until January. And then in January, I was playing some orchestral concerts. I played with the Detroit Symphony and the New York Philharmonic and the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. And that would stop, and then the stuff with the band would start. And I'd pick up another thing with Orpheus, then the band would start. So I played my last concert with Orpheus on Sunday. And here we are in beautiful downtown Oklahoma City, getting ready to perform with the band.
Wonderful. Yeah, so you stayed going back and forth, keeping with your chops, keeping up with leading your band and your collaborations through these times. You know, your brother, Winton, was here last spring in April, and he had mentioned to us when we were all hanging out that you were practicing a lot. You were using this time to really stay keen with your instrument. Can you speak
funny.
to that?
Yeah. When we would talk all the time, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm shedding, man." He goes, "What?" Because when I was a kid, I would never practice. When we were younger, Winton was the one who was always practicing. He said, "Why don't you practice?" I'm like, "I have better things to do." Now it's completely inversed.
Yeah, his wisdom allowed you to journey into the world of practicing.
You certain kind of maturity. And your priorities change. And I mean, for me, it was like once I left the Tonight Show, it was like, well, if you're leaving for a reason, then maybe you should try to invest in that reason and see how far you can actually take it. I think that was the turning point for me. Like, okay, I've dabbled in entertainment over the decades, and I always come back to the less popular side. And if I'm going to do this, I need to just go ahead and delve into it, feet first, just go all in. And that's when I really started to practice. And I refuse to say the beauty of practice, because there's nothing beautiful about it. But you can achieve beautiful results from practicing, and practicing is just a necessity.
And it's time with your horn, right? It's one-on-one conversation, time to develop that relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So were there any silver linings during this time other than practicing and staying busy in the last year?
I mean, I actually enjoyed the time off. I caught up on a lot of movies and a lot of really, I saw a lot of boy TV shows. There was a lot of explosions, on television in the room through science fiction wars and, just stuff, the movies that boys like. And I will probably always, even though I watched a lot of what would be considered by my friends in New Orleans highbrow stuff, I still have my love affair with things that explode on camera. And I did a lot of that. I listened to a lot of music, particularly things that I wasn't familiar with. I tend to try to find things that take me out of my comfort zone. And I think the most important part is that my daughters, this is the most time that they've ever spent around me. And it's the most time that they'll probably ever spend around me in their lives. And I think they came away with it with the idea that I'm not as much of a jerk as they thought I was prior to the pandemic. So
Definite silver lining. Yeah.
so that worked out. That was good.
Good. Works out for the whole fam. Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah. Well, you mentioned you like things that keep you out of your comfort zone. That's clear by your career, Branford, right? You're considered the most eclectic of your brothers, right? You've performed with Sting and Grateful Dead. As you mentioned, you're the musical director of, you were in the 90s, right? Of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And then you've also collaborated with classical orchestras, like you mentioned, Orpheus, the chamber music ensembles. But you've also tapped into film, and you're a Tony Award nominee, Emmy nominee, multi-Grammy Award winner. What motivates you when you're thinking about a collaboration, and what types of creative minds you want to be working with?
I don't really think about it. When I moved to New York, I met a musician, and he said, "Well, man, you got to get a business card. I mean, you're a businessman now." And I called my dad, said, "I need $100. I can get some business cards." He says, "Man, your instrument's your calling card." He says, "I'll give you $100 to go get a lesson, but I'm not going to give you $100 to get a business card. I mean, if you play well, people will know about it, and you'll get hired. So why don't you just focus on that? And your job right now is to just prepare for situations. And if you get in a situation where you're in over your head, make sure that doesn't happen a second time." And I was like, "Wow, okay, great." So I would say yes to gigs that were way outside of what I was used to. And if the musicians gave me time to listen to the style of music, one summer, a friend of mine who played in the merengue band was going to play with Tito Puente and asked me if I would sub for him. And a lot of the Dominican musicians weren't thrilled with a gringo showing up. And the music started, and I was completely lost. I just didn't know where anything was. And there's I never remember the name of an instrument, but it's an instrument where it's like a bass drum, but in Afro-Cuban music, they sit on it and they play both sides. And I turned to the other saxophone player and said, "I'm lost." And he pointed to that instrument. And the first gig was just miserable. They hated me. I hated me. Second or third, I started to actually understand the function of that instrument and the sound. And then I found where the beat was, and then I was cool. And by the end of the week, they were like, "Whoa, all right, man, it's cool." So, I mean, I learned something from that experience. I knew they weren't going to call me back again because they have so many musicians who can do that well and didn't have to go through that kind of learning experience. But that was a great experience for me. It was. I always felt it's one of the things I encourage my children to do, and it's something I encourage my students to do, is to the natural inclination for people when faced with things that are outside of their comfort zone is to double down and defend the things they know, rather than try to get excited about the things they don't know. And I always try to encourage all of my students and my kids to be excited about the possibility of failure, because failure can be a permanent existence if you embrace the culture of avoidance, or it can be a short-term existence, as my football coach would say, short-term misery for long-term gain.
Oh, right. Absolutely. That definitely aligns with your musical conversation too, around practice and spending the time and relationships, right? So much of what you said, meeting a new bandmate, learning about a new art form or music form, it's a relationship that develops over time, right? You either come back to it or you don't, maybe.
Well, you have a relationship with the musicians, but then you develop a relationship with it. Like I've developed a relationship with classical music through failure. That goes beyond, "Oh, I just really like it." It's like this, and it's not something you can. I mean, I feel it. And in classical music, there are these two worlds. There's the world of correctness, because one of the things I dig about it is that you can't play your own notes. You have to play the notes.
Yeah.
So you spend so much time making sure that the notes are right that you don't really play the music, you're playing the page. And then when things start to slow down in your mind, then suddenly you can actually hear the instruments around you. And at that point, you can actually play the music.
Mm.
And every time there's a new piece, that's the process for me. It's like there's the process of learning the notes and understanding where you fit in. And once you do that, then you can start to make music out of it. And it's a pretty incredible process because it doesn't allow you, again, to rely on the things you do well. The composer does not care, and the music certainly does not care.
Mm. Is that it's an incredible juxtaposition to jazz and improvisation, right? Which is almost the flip side of how you were
Well,
describing.
they're very similar in a way.
Mm.
Because I mean, when I learned jazz, what I understood because when I learn things, I just listen to them. I don't buy books and study them technically. If you listen to jazz music in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s, the language of jazz is actually jazz. And then once Charlie Parker showed up, and subsequently Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane, then the language of jazz became improvisation, which was a fatal mistake in a lot of ways, because jazz did not invent improvisation. All cultures improvise.
Yeah.
I mean, 18th century French Baroque music is 15-20% improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
I read books on ornamentation, when to go up, when to go down. And then I listened to musicians playing it. And it's just, man, you go up when it makes sense to go up, and you go down when it makes sense to go down. And there's a Baroque flutist named Berthold Kuijken from the Kuijken family. I think they're Belgian or Dutch.
Okay.
And they all play Baroque instruments and Baroque music. And he did a master class at a clarinet convention in New Orleans. And I happened to be in New Orleans at the time, and I went over the Loyola University where they were having the master class.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the students in the master class was playing the piece, and he kind of chuckled and said, "You really love those eighth notes, don't you?" And he says, "Well, it's on the page. They're eighth notes." He goes, "Well, not really. The page is kind of a guide." He says, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
A dotted quarter note. What is a dotted quarter note? And for the people in the audience that don't know, there's a dot to the right of the note. So if the note is equal to 1 beat, the dot, you increase the length of it by 1/2 of the original note. So it's 1.5 beats instead of 1 beat, which is what the student correctly said to him. And the note after the quarter note is a half note, which is worth 2 beats. He says, well, suppose you were to think that the dotted quarter note is a note that's shorter than a half note, but longer than a quarter note.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all this wiggle room in between. And how long you play the note depends on the note that comes after it and the note that precedes it. And it's just like that little emoji with the head blowing up. That is my moment. I said, oh God. It's like the musical key to everything is that all these notes are subjective. Everything is subjective. And in jazz, it's the same. When you play things are not based on what the harmonic structure is. When you play things are based on the sound and what's going on and with the band. And that's what actual improvisation is. It's actual conversation. Let's say if we're having a conversation, my answers are subject to your questions. I don't show up with prepared answers. And
Yep.
A lot of times the way improvisation is taught, they're giving you prepared answers to problems. And when I hear musicians play, I can tell that they play the prepared answers. And what I like to do is find songs that disrupt the prepared answers and say, yeah, let's play this. My students hate it at first. They hate it at first.
It's a challenge, right?
Because it blows up their whole so-called philosophy on improvisation. And I say, well, if what you do works, this should work. Why is it not working? red-faced, angry. 2 years later, man, I'm glad you did that. So yeah, jazz is jazz is fantastic at the top level of it, but improvisation is not really at the core. It's not at the core of it. Even when you have long solos, it's more like chamber music with small groups.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever seen, if you've ever stood outside of a party with your friends talking, and the conversation starts bouncing all over the place, and someone redirects the conversation, or takes the conversation away, and you have to redirect it. That's kind of what soloing is like to me.
Uh-huh.
So anything is possible, and it's not like, oh, it's G7, so I'll play this. Oh, it's C minor, so I'll play that. It's like, well, I'm gonna go up there and play, and whatever the guys in the band, and that's people that aren't jazz fans per se, and that's a lot of people. They can not really the name drop, but this forward for the Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green, came to our concert.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back. He says, yeah, man, I just wanted to holler at you guys. That was really amazing. I'm not really a jazz fan, but I could see how what y'all are doing is the same thing that we're doing. You have this information, and the information is passing from musician to musician, and it's subject to like the situation. It's not a concrete thing. And I went, wow, most music students couldn't give me that answer. I was just kind of like, man, he didn't use music language, but he understood exactly what it was that we were trying to do. And to me, that's what actual improvisation is.
Okay.
So it's very similar to what happens in classical music as well.
Okay. It's that conversation, which we always come back to.
That was great. Great.
And yeah, that's fantastic. He's a mover, right? He's a mover. You're a musician that's moving, and dancers. Jazz also comes out of movement conversations, right? Movement in New Orleans, in the squares, in the churches, and the parks, right? The idea of I set down a riff and you're going to respond to it, or maybe in response to movement or different conversations happening. Do you feel like we've gotten very far from that raw, maybe initial infusion of improvisation in jazz, or do you think it's just evolved differently?
Oh, we've gotten away from it in ways that are they seem small. It's really, it's so hard to talk about. If you listen to traditional jazz, 50% of their repertoire was church music.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you read the biographies on these guys, they were clearly not religious people. So let's not get the two confused. But it is so clear to me that the story of jazz comes out of the Pentecostal church, the Protestant church. And I'm Catholic, so I had to learn that. I didn't grow up with that. And as jazz evolved, the musicians got more away from that sound, and it's the sound I'm talking about. It's not the religious aspect of it. But if you listen to music in the 30s and the 40s, there's a discernible relationship to the dance beat in jazz in the 50s, and then by the time the late 50s, 60s rolled around, the musicians were further and further away from the dance beat origins of jazz, because in the 1950s, the musicians who played in the 20s were still alive. But by the late 50s, they had started to die off, and the newer musicians came in who were more interested in playing than they were interested in learning. And they didn't have a historical relationship with the music or even a musical relationship with the music. They were more interested in claiming jazz as theirs and representative of their generation. And they were it's like that whole, anti-disestablishment movement, where we're going to turn everything upside down. And then after you do all of that, you wind up like living in a country manor in London. Roger Daltrey was the song "I Want to Die Before I Get Old," talking about my generation, and now he's Sir Roger Daltrey. Let's not lose that irony.
Yes,
it's like we spend so much time rebelling against our parents, even though I didn't. I mean, I was a good Southern boy. I didn't really spend much time trying to rebel against my parents. And then very quietly, you become your parents, and sometimes you become worse than your parents. And I think music is in that place where musicians are starting to realize that a lot of the musical choices we made, I mean, they don't really work.
Mhm.
They just don't work. And musicians have explanations as to why jazz is so unpopular. And it always points to the musicians blaming the audience. When, being a fan of Occam's razor, when you're looking at all the variables that are happening, the simplest answer is often the correct answer. It is the musicians who have changed. It is not the audiences have been the same. So when I read these articles about how great the audience was in the 40s, you listen to a live recording of Charlie Parker, and all you hear are people talking.
Okay.
And now in 1960s, they started saying, we don't want you talking at our shows because we're going to be like classical music. Well, classical music, they used to be talking at classical concerts.
Yes.
And then when the
chamber music
sponsorship of, and then when the corporate sponsorship of classical institutions in the States dried up because they thought they'd get more traction putting their names on football stadiums than they would in concert halls, then the classical institutions had to address the reality that they had been estranged from the people for a very long period of time. And all of these art forms, this is something that they have to deal with. When if somebody says, well, people don't really like jazz, and the correct answer should be, well, it's not for everybody. It's like physics. It's not for everybody. Like, when you hear big mega donors who are donating to universities like Auburn or Alabama or Stanford, and you say, well, man, what is it? They don't say, man, the physics program, I just felt so moved. It's like, man, the campus, the environment, the football team, just the whole thing. I just fell in love with the school and the vibe, and I grew up there. It's never just, there was this one English teacher or this one math teacher. These things are not for everybody. And if you play music with the understanding that it's not for everybody, then you can get more people to like it than you do standing on an imperial tower, also known as a stage, saying you guys should be bowing down to us because we're really substantial and great and you're all stupid. I mean, yeah. Who wouldn't want to pay money to experience that crap? That is a template for success if I ever saw one. And the thing that we've tried to do with the group to a person is to just accept the fact that the majority of audiences hear music with their eyes, which is why the operative verb used in concert going is see, not hear.
Yes.
Really looking forward to seeing you. Guess who I'm going to see this week? So you give them something to see. Okay, if that's what they're digging, it's cool. They'll like the music too. But so when jazz was really popular, the music had a certain kind of dance beat intensity to it, and we've made a return to that. And we really enjoy ourselves. We don't have that strange social relationship with people. We're all very outgoing. Everyone in the band, all the guys are really charismatic. We dress nice, and we have a great time when we play, and we joke with one another on stage. I mean, it's not just that thing that took its place, the whole quiet genius, not speaking to the audience thing that everybody said, man, Miles was so cool, we turned his back on the audience. That's not even actually what happened. But what he was doing, and this is from the horse's mouth, he had some new guys in the band and they weren't playing the right thing, so he turned to play to them so they could understand what they were supposed to do. And since we were in that era of the enfant terrible, they said, oh, Miles is really cool, he's even turning his back on the audience. That's how little he cares. And he says, oh, well, if they're into that kind of crap, why would I turn it down?
Okay.
So you hear people that know Miles talk about him. You say, man, tell me about Miles Davis. Oh man, he turned his back on the audience. That's not what was happening at all. But the myth is often more. It has more juice than the truth. So,
if anything, right, he understood.
Run with the myth.
He needed to pull in the musician at that time, which then would follow suit with the audience. But again, we use one sense to see, right? We go and listen to music or see music. We don't always feel it, or you don't always touch it or taste it. And maybe
well, it's hard.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to listen to music,
Mm-hmm.
which is why we tend to rely on songs with words.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
hard to listen, period.
it's
Right?
hard to listen. That's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
And
as a person who has a strange name,
yeah.
what's your name? Bradford? I mean, it's immediately.
Listen. Yeah.
What's your name? Branford. Brandon. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Buford. Bradley.
That's a new one.
We
You've heard it all.
In all of our conversations, it's something that I really worked on. We half listen.
Mm-hmm.
We half listen, and we're so used to all the social cues. Hey, how are you? I'm good. There's no real. This is a reflex reaction,
Mm-hmm.
and it also called small talk.
Yeah.
And you gravitate. If you know a Brandon, then my name's going to be Brandon to you. If you know a Bradley, it's going to be Bradley because you didn't hear me, and I've really worked on it because it's a human tendency. And when people with strange names say their name and then I say their name correctly, they go, "Oh, you said my name right." I say, "Well, yeah, I have a strange name too." So, I really worked on that though. I really worked on paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's an acquired skill.
It is very much so. It is in all sorts of arenas in our society, right?
Yes, in life.
And that's something, Branford, that I really appreciate about your work in preparation for this interview. I was listening to other interviews of yours, and you speak about listening quite a bit. And I think that probably also aligns with why you're revered for your tone on the saxophone and your sound. And then you've been a long time band leader with collaborators, right? Like Kenny Kirkland and other folks that you've collaborated with over the years. And that says a lot about your listening skills and your leadership skills. Can you speak to listening and the importance in general? I mean, you have been, but with music and maybe even how that it also aligns with the need to listen in society and hear people out more. Yeah.
Well, I even said it. There's a book. I think I have her name right. Her name is Carol Dweck.
Okay.
She wrote a book called Mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's actually accurate, but for the sake of her argument, it was accurate. She broke people down into two mindsets, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And she did tests on kids 4, 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And when kids are really good at something and are told they're really good at it, their confidence swells.
Yes.
And then when they're suddenly faced with a problem where they're not good at it, 1% of the kids become excited at the possibility of learning something new. A larger percentage of the kids were very defensive and tended to not want to engage in the thing that they weren't good at, even at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a thing that I think that is the more innate response, the survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go over there. I'm not going to eat that berry.
Yeah.
As Shakespeare wrote, "'Twas a brave man that first ate an oyster." And somebody brought it out and they said, "I'm not eating it." And somebody said, "I'll eat it." And so,
and voila.
Yeah. Like in Brazil, they always say, "Well, these plants are fine, these plants are not fine." I'm like, "Yeah, how'd y'all figure that out?"
Exactly.
They're like, "Yeah, some brave fool." Okay, 10 dead people. What do they all have in common? They ate brightly colored plants. Don't eat the brightly colored plants. In society, it's the safe thing is to lean on what you know, and listening is an acquired skill, and it's very rarely acquired. It's not innate, and it's one of those things you have to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
And every student I've had, the first lesson, I ask them 2 questions. First of all, I say, "Why are you here?" And they say something like, "Well, I'm here to take a lesson." I say, "Besides that, why are you here?" And I don't know what you're talking about. I say, "Okay, forget it." Play a C scale 2 octaves. They play the scale 2 octaves. I say, "Okay, what did that sound like?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, in about 45 seconds, we've established 2 things. You have no idea why you're here, and you have no idea what you sound like. So there's really nothing I can teach you until you figure out one of those 2 things. So come back next week or not. and a larger number don't come back than the number that do. And that's actually fine with me, because again, this stuff is not for everybody. This is not for everybody. And if I can help somebody find out early on this is not the thing they want to do, yeah, that's a good thing. So yeah, listening is hard, and it requires a tremendous amount of work. It's easy work, but you just have to do it a lot. And be patient, because it's not like I'm gonna work on this for a week and it's gonna happen. No, you're gonna work on this for 6 months, and it gets a little better. It's imperceptible though. The improvement is imperceptible, kind of like when the kitchen ceiling falls and there was a leak, an imperceptible leak in the pipes, and it's drip, 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 saturation, weeks, months, bang. So how long does it take for the ceiling to fall through? Well, it depends on the person. But you are getting better. You just can't feel it until you feel it. And then when you feel it, it's like, oh my God, this is great.
Another head.
It's been a year-long process, a 2-year-long process, a 5-year-long process. It's just that, and that kind of work helps you, because it's spatial learning. Spatial learning helps you in whatever it is that you choose to do, even if it's not music. Engaging in spatial understanding is an important and great thing.
Absolutely. There's spaces that we're in, right? The rooms that we practice in with other instruments, other people making music. There's also the places we come from in the spaces. I know that you're a proud New Orleans resident, and
yes, ma'am.
Resident, but we're in the South. Auburn's not too far from New Orleans. Very proud to be in the South. And it's a very special region in New Orleans. The fact that your family is one of the musical legacy families of a rich, deep lineage of music that really started so much for this globe in those parks and those squares. What does that mean for you as well, to be carrying that lineage with you on a stage? That's something you think about quite a bit?
I never think about it at all. I'm grateful for it. And when I do interviews, I talk about it a lot. But when I'm working, it's like you're in that moment working, and you're trying to play well. You're not thinking about heritage and lineage and all those things. You're thinking about not screwing up the gig, or just having fun. And we're out on the back, and I got these 3 fabulous musicians on the stage with me, and none of them are from New Orleans. Sure. None of them are from the South. And yet we're able to really create a sonic palette together that's just very special for me. I love sharing the stage with those guys. So that's the stuff that's more in the forefront of our minds. But I'm a proud Southerner. I mean, during the pandemic, I drove to New Orleans with my girls, and we would always stop in Auburn. There's a hotel. Is it called the Collegiate or something like that? It's right on the edge of the campus.
Yeah.
And we would stay there, and we'd walk around the campus, and the kids were like, man, this place is beautiful. This is great. It was a little chilly most of the times when we were going, but yeah, we stopped. Actually, it was one day in the fall when the teams were playing, when Auburn was playing, and the place was packed. And like, what is going on here? Welcome to SEC football, baby. It was great.
Magical.
The lines were long at the breakfast joint, but yeah, we hung on Auburn overnight about 4 times in the pandemic.
Cool. Well, shout out to the Collegiate. They're friends of ours, and
yeah, nice spot.
We'll be not far from there. The Gouge Center is right down the street. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to welcome you back. So many more questions we could ask. It's just fascinating to hear from you, and so exciting to have you all coming in about a week and a half. This will air a few days before your performance.
Great.
We'll welcome you back, and we'll be listening. We'll make sure to be a strong, fun audience for you. Is there anything else you want to share with our?
No, I'm just looking forward to playing in the South. It's always special for me.
Yeah, always special to have a Southerner and to have you and here for this Talkback. So just a couple announcements before we head out. We want to thank the Opelika Observer and the Auburn Network. Those are 2 of our sponsors for this engagement. And then we'll be in the seats ready to dance and enjoy enjoy your time on the 20th. So 7:30 p.m., everyone, there's tickets still available. Come check out Branford, an evening with Branford Marsalis here at the Gouge Center, Sunday the 20th, February 20th at 7:30. Thank you so much, Branford, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy.